Chapter 10. The Law of Connection. Leaders touch a heart before they ask for a hand. There are incidents in the lives and careers of leaders that become defining moments of their leadership. In the perception of followers, the general public, and historians, those moments often represent who those leaders are and what they stand for. Here's an example of what I mean. I believe in the presidency of George W. Bush can be summed up by two defining moments that he experienced during his time in office. A connection made. The first moment occurred early in his first term, and it defined that entire term in office on September 11th, 2001. The United States was attacked by terrorists who crashed planes into the World Trade Center and Pentagon. People in the United States were angry. They were fearful. They were uncertain about the future. And they were in mourning for the thousands of people who lost their lives to terrorists. Just 4 days after the collapse of the World Trade Center towers, Bush went to Ground Zero. He spent time there with the firefighters, police officers, and rescue workers. He shook hands. He listened. He took in devastation. He thanked the people working there and told them, "The nation sends its love and compassion to everybody who is here." Reports said that the spirit of the tired searchers lifted when the president arrived and started shaking hands. Cameras captured Bush standing in the wreckage with his arms around firefighter Bob Beckwith. When some members of the crowd shouted that they couldn't hear him, Bush called back, "I can hear you. The rest of the world hears you. And the people who knock these buildings down will hear all of us soon." The people cheered. They felt validated. They felt understood. Bush had connected with them in a way no one had seen him to do prior to that moment. Nobody's home. The second incident came during Bush's second 4 years in office, and it defined the second term. It occurred on August 31st, 2005, just 2 days after the landfall of Hurricane Katrina. After the levees in New Orleans broke and water flooded into the city. Instead of visiting the city as he did in New York after 9/11, Bush flew over New Orleans in Air Force One, peering through one of the jet's small windows to see the damage. To the people of the Gulf Coast, it was a picture of indifference. As the tragedy unfolded, no one in authority at any level of government connected with the people of New Orleans. Not the president, not the governor, not the mayor. By the time Mayor Ray Nagin ordered the city's evacuation, it was too late for many poor residents to leave. He sent people to the Superdome, advising them to eat before they went because the local government had made no provisions for them. Meanwhile, he held press conferences and complained that he wasn't getting any help. And the people most affected by the problems felt abandoned, forgotten, and betrayed. After the worst of the tragedy was over, no matter what President Bush said or how much help he provided, he was unable to regain the people's confidence and trust. It's true that when Democratic Mayor Nagin was re-elected less than a year after the disaster, he thanked Bush for delivering for the citizens of New Orleans. And Donna Brazile, another Democrat, has since described Bush as very much engaged in the rebuilding process and praised him for prompting Congress to dedicate money to rebuilding the levees. But by then, Bush could not undo the image of indifference he had created. He had failed to connect with the people. He had broken the law of connection. The heart comes first. When it comes to working with people, the heart comes before the head. That's true whether you're communicating to a stadium full of people, leading a team meeting, or trying to relate to your spouse. Think about how you react to people. If you listen to a speaker or a teacher, do you want to hear a bunch of dry statistics or a load of facts? Or would you rather the speaker engage you on a human level, maybe with a story or a joke? If you've been on any kind of winning team in business, sports, or service, you know that the leader didn't simply give instructions and then send you on your way. No, he or she connected with you on an emotional level. For the leaders to be effective, they need to connect with people. Why? Because you first have to touch people's hearts before you ask them for a hand. That is a law of connection. All great leaders and communicators recognize this truth, and act on it almost instinctively. You can't move people to action unless you first move them with emotion. In the little box it says, you can't move people to action unless you first move them with emotion. The heart comes before the head. An outstanding orator and African American leader of the 19th century was Frederick Douglass. It's said that he had a remarkable ability to connect with people and move their hearts when he spoke. Historian Lerone Bennett said of Douglass, he could make people laugh at a slave owner preaching the duties of Christian obedience, could make them see the humiliation of a black maiden ravished by a brutal slave owner, could make them hear the sobs of a mother separated from her child. Through him, people could cry, curse, and feel. Through him, they could live slavery. The Great Connector. Good leaders work at connecting with others all of the time, whether they are communicating to an entire organization or working with a single individual. The stronger the relationship you form with the followers, the greater the connection you forge, and the more likely those followers will be to want to help. I used to tell my staff, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. They would groan because they heard me say it so much, but they recognized that it was true nonetheless. You develop credibility with people when you connect with them and show that you genuinely care and want to help them. And as a result, they usually respond in kind and want to help you. An excellent example of a leader who was able to connect with both audience and individuals was President Ronald Reagan. His ability to develop rapport with an audience is reflected in the nickname he received as president, the Great Communicator. But he also had the ability to touch the hearts of the individuals close to him. He really could have been called the Great Connector. Little box. The stronger the relationship and connection between individuals, the more likely the follower will want to help the leader. Former Reagan speechwriter Peggy Noonan said that when Reagan used to return to the White House from long trips and the staff heard his helicopter landing on the lawn, everyone would stop working and staff member Donna Elliott would say, "Daddy's home." They couldn't wait to see him. Some employees dread it when their boss shows up. Reagan's people felt encouraged because he connected with them. Connect with people one at a time. One key to connecting with others is recognizing that even in a group, you have to relate to people as individuals. General Norman Schwarzkopf remarked, "I have seen competent leaders who stood in front of a platoon and all they saw was a platoon. But great leaders stand in front of a platoon and see it as 44 individuals, each of whom has aspiration, each of whom has to live, each of whom wants to do good." I've had the opportunity to speak to some wonderful audiences during the course of my career. The largest have been in stadiums with more than 60,000 people in attendance. Some of my colleagues, some of my colleagues who also speak for a living have asked me, "How in the world do you speak to that many people?" The secret is simple. I don't try to talk to thousands. I focus on talking to one person. That's the only way to connect with people. It's the same way when writing a book. I don't think of the millions of people who've read my books. I think of you. I believe that if I connect with you as an individual, then what I have to offer might be able to help you. If I'm not connecting, you'll stop reading and go do something else. Little box. To connect with people in a group, relate to them as individuals. How do you connect? Whether you're speaking in front of a large audience or chatting in the hallway with an individual, the guidelines are the same. Number 1, connect with yourself. You must know who you are and have confidence in yourself if you desire to connect with others. People don't heed the call of an uncertain trumpet. Be confident and be yourself. If you don't believe in who you are and where you want to lead, work on that before doing anything else. Number 2, communicate with openness and sincerity. People can smell a phony a mile away. Legendary NFL coach Bill Walsh observed, "Nothing is more effective than sincere, accurate praise, and nothing is more lame than a cookie-cutter compliment." Authentic leaders connect. Number 3, know your audience. When you work with individuals, knowing your audience means learning people's names, finding out about their histories, asking about their dreams. When you communicate to an audience, you learn about the organization and its goals. You want to speak to what they care about, not just what you care about. Number 4, live your message. Perhaps the most important thing you can do as a leader and communicator is to practice what you preach. That's where credibility comes from. Plenty of people out in the marketplace are willing to say one thing to an audience, but do something else. They don't last. Number 5, go to where they are. As a communicator, I dislike any kind of barrier to communication. I don't like to be too far from my audience or too high above them on a stage. And I definitely don't want any physical barriers between me and the people. But a person's method of communication can also be a barrier. Whether I'm speaking from a stage or sitting across from someone in my office, I try to speak the other person's language, to go to that person. I try to be attuned to others' cultures, background, education, and so on. I adapt to others. I don't expect them to adapt to me. Number 6, focus on them, not yourself. If you got on an elevator with me and asked me to tell you the secret to good communication before I got off at the next floor, I'd tell you to focus on others, not yourself. That's the number one problem of inexperienced speakers, and it is also the number one problem of ineffective leaders. You will always connect faster when your focus is not on yourself. Number 7, believe in them. It's one thing to communicate to people because you believe you have something of value to say. It's another to communicate with people because you believe they have value. People's opinion of us has less to do with what they see in us, and it does what they see in us than it does when we can help them see in themselves. Number 8, offer direction and hope. People expect leaders to help them get where they want to go, but good leaders do that and more. French General Napoleon Bonaparte said, "Leaders are dealers in hope." That is so true. When you give people hope, you give them a future. It's the leader's job. Some leaders have problems with the law of connection because they believe that connecting is a responsibility of followers. That is especially true of positional leaders. They often think, "I'm the boss. I have the position. These are my employees. Let them come to me." But successful leaders who obey the law of connection are always initiators. They take the first step with others and then make the effort to continue building relationships. That's not always easy, but it's important to the success of the organization. A leader has to do it, no matter how many obstacles there might be. I learned this lesson in 1972 when I was faced with a very difficult situation. I was moving to Lancaster, Ohio. Not Lancaster, California. To accept the leadership of a church there. It was going to be a big step up in responsibility for me. Before I accepted the position, I learned that the church had just gone through a big battle related to a building project. Heading up one of the factions was the number one influencer in the church, a man named Jim. I also heard that Jim had a reputation for being negative and something of a maverick. He liked to use his influence to move the people in directions that didn't always help the organization. Little box. It's one thing to communicate to people because you believe you have something of value to say. It's another to communicate with people because you believe they have value.